I was 45 years old. We had two small children, and I was thinking, this is it. I'm not going to live very long. It was a day, and it was terrifying. I have always been a runner. And so I would run around where we lived, Mercer Island, Washington, which is in a lake right next to Seattle. And I noticed a couple of times the weather was cool in the morning, and I would touch my nose and there was blood. So why was I getting a nosebleed? So I went to the local clinic, which was part of an HMO, and he takes a scope and he looks up there and he says, I don't see anything to cauterize. So he said, I think we should do a blood test to see why you're bleeding. And when I get back there, the phone rings. What's up? Well, your white blood count is elevated and we should retest. And I said, when? He said, now. Woo. So drive back across, okay. And so they do the blood test. And then I didn't think of it because I was healthy, a runner, etc. Dr. Littlewood calls and he said, how do you feel? And I said, I feel fine. And you remember these words, and he says, that's not the answer I want to hear. You haven't had the flu? No. You haven't had an infection? No. I said, well, what are you concerned about? He said, well, if your white count is elevated and you have no reason like an infection, it could be leukemia. Dun, 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 dun. And, you're really shocked. And I wasn't really clear whether leukemia was a cancer, did it affect adults. I didn't know any of that. I was 45 years old. We had two small children, and I was thinking, this is it. I'm not going to live very long. Leukemia can be a fatal condition. And I thought, well, gee, have I had a satisfying life? And leaving Esther with two kids, oh my God, pretty tough.
What, back in 2000, did you know of clinical trials to begin with? What was your reaction when you heard about it? What got you to say, okay, I'll give this a shot?
I knew nothing about clinical trials. And, I would say I was at the starting point of where many people, and they say, well, gee, I don't know if I want to be a guinea pig. What are they going to do to me? Will it really benefit me? Could it benefit others, etc.? I just wanted to get well. I thought about it. And by then I was starting to develop symptoms after 4 years, swollen lymph nodes, enlarged spleen, fatigue, etc. So what did I do? Again, I went back to where I'd been at time of diagnosis, and that is connect with other patients. Go online. Hey, does anybody know anything about this clinical trial? This person in Texas, because it was MD Anderson, right? I'm a school teacher. I'm on that trial. I do roofing. I'm on that trial. Can I talk to you on the phone? And I did. And I said, are you glad you're in it? Are you glad you're doing it? And they all were. So that patient-to-patient connection gave me some confidence, and in the leading scientist doctor I had, to say yes. Now it's scary when you do it because they give you a whole bunch of papers to sign. And there were some patients who died very early in the trial. So there was this big black box. You could die, basically. So you have the doctor, you have the research coordinator, you have the research nurse, all these people in white coats, my wife Esther, me sitting there, sign here. And we did. And we said, okay, when does this start? They said, in about 4 hours, you're going to that unit and you're going to get an infusion. And that's what happened. And I started right away. And that was 6 months of treatment. So when you have little kids, that's a lot of juggling to do. But we pulled it off. The trial, I fainted the first night from IV Benadryl. So that was an experience. The nurses giving me smelling salts, and I'd hit my head on a bar when I fell, and so my mouth was bleeding. And that first infusion took about 8.5 hours. But the trial worked out, and it ended up with a 17-year remission. So I'm very grateful for that.
Let's just take the time to talk about, you said it was a phase 2 clinical trial. And I think it'd be great to just right now touch on, there are differences, of course, with the phase 1, 2, 3, and different, chapters in between. How would you explain to a new patient when they are being told there's a clinical trial that there are these differences and what goes on with each of them?
Well, phase 1 is typically first in humans. Now, that doesn't mean they weren't testing it in the lab on animals, et cetera. But first in humans, and often that's with the very sickest people. Phase 2, they have it pretty well figured out. And now there's a larger group, maybe 100 people. And they're tweaking the dosage. They're really monitoring for safety, looking for any side effects. And then a phase 3 trial often goes worldwide. And now it's on hundreds and hundreds of people, and they're looking for little signals of whether side effects or what they call adverse events, things that they don't want to happen, show up. But what happened is that I got this combination therapy known as FCR, fludarabine, cyclophosphamide, 2 chemo drugs, and a targeted monoclonal antibody, rituximab. And I was like patient number 70. And I got that combination 10 years before it was approved as a combination by the FDA. Now, would I have been alive had I just had chemo and not had this Rituxan added and been in this trial? I don't know. So for me, it provided a real advantage and a head start on state-of-the-art treatment. I'm very grateful for that. I think it saved my life. And that was the decision I made, that the traditional approach was not great, was pretty toxic, and did not cause a long remission. And I was 45 years old. And then at the time of the trial, I guess 49. And I wanted to have a long life. I'm 71 and a half now. So obviously it made a big difference.
That is incredible. I love that so much. And actually, since you're talking about it, Andrew, it was you played a big role in that too, in that you were an advocate for yourself, right? You didn't go along with the HMO doctor. That could be tough for a lot of people, right? You don't want to be a bad patient or a doctor knows best paradigm. What would you say to someone who wants that but doesn't know if they're allowed to, or what's your message to people out there, patients and care partners, about the importance of speaking up for yourself?
I think you need to be respectful of the doctors and nurses you're dealing with, but recognize that they may have a lot on their plate. My HMO doctor was tasked with treating every cancer that any member of the HMO would have, with leukemia maybe not being high on the list, breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer, be much higher. And he really had to spend a lot of time being up on that. Was he necessarily up or totally informed and of the latest research for what I had? Maybe not so much. So I, in a respectful way, said, I know you're a very devoted doctor, but I want to go the extra mile. And as he said, well, we're not going to pay for you to go get a second opinion, but it's your right. Well, guess what happened? I was eventually in the clinical trial, which was coordinated by MD Anderson in Houston and the HMO clinic in Seattle, where I lived. And I got them to work together. Well, I think the word that applies then, but applies every day, is uncertainty, right? So you don't know if another shoe is going to drop, either from the medicines you had or from the illness that's not cured, because it wasn't cured. It was knocked back. I was in remission. When people invite Esther or me for something or together, invariably I feel the answer is yes. Do you want to go out to dinner? Yes. Do you want to come to a show with us? Yes. Do you want to go on a bike ride with us? Yes. Why? Because that's what life's about. And while I'd like to plan for next month, next year, 10 years from now, I don't know if I have that. So today, the answer is yes. I never expected to be diagnosed with anything other than a recurrence of chronic lymphocytic leukemia. Never expected it.